Welcome back to another PCBH Corner. We got an exciting topic, as always. And so this topic comes from some of the emails that we get regularly with people reaching out, which we really appreciate people reaching out, asking questions, and then also letting us know what you all are working on. It's inspiring for us. And then also the consulting that we do when we go on site. And we made a video about this one time called Instagram versus reality. And that, we talk a lot about in these videos, like do these behaviors, do these different things. And what we're really talking about is kind of like an Instagram version of like PCBH, where you have a lot of BHCs that are very well integrated within the system. You have space, you have logistical support, like you get to do some really awesome things. The difficulty is that my mind predicts probably that is not the norm or the kind of expectation. The probability is that it's most likely more of not Instagram. It's more of a reality that there might be a difficult ratio of BHCs, people might be new to it, PCPs might not be uptaking it. So the question becomes, what do we tell people, or what would you tell people that if they're going into a system, maybe they're new, maybe they got hired, or maybe they're trying to build something, and they see the articles, they go to presentations, they see our videos, and we're talking about all these different things about completing 27 handoffs at one clinic in one day, and it's like, I just don't know where to even begin.
Right.
Because that seems like such a far down the road kind of thing. Where does your mind go? What do you think would be suggestions, strategies, different ways for people to still try to hit a value?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, I think the elephant in the room is that integrated care, generally speaking, is really new. It's a new field. I know we've talked about that on other corners. It's a new field, so it takes a while to get to the point where their implementation science and all the sciences come together to even kind of give us like a little bit of a model or roadmap of how to do things. And there's been a lot of theoretical things published about here's how you do it. And then there's been some, okay, well, we know that this works or that works, but there's not something that says, here's exactly how you do it. And there was the recipe article that we had alluded to. And the more that we keep talking about it, it seems really clear that we really have to understand core principles, in my opinion. More so than a recipe, it's more about being a chef. So if I'm a chef, I'm going to be understanding core principles about what's going on and how to make dishes and what kind of flavors work together and understanding how I'm not a chef, but those type of things. And so looking at this situation, chances are folks probably are in a situation that's less than optimal. It's not going to match the books, the articles, the PCBH corners, but it doesn't mean that you can't do anything. Like if you look at it from the perspective of, okay, well, what are the core principles? Well, we've talked about this on other corners, but we're just going to kind of make the summary one, that what we strive to do is we sit and think about, okay, what setting am I in? We're in a federally qualified health center. We're operating primary care services. So it's very good to start with, what are the goals of primary care? Then what are the goals specific to our organization within the context of primary care? Once you kind of know that, then you're like, okay, well, then I think Gather and PCBH does match up, because our medical wants to be generalists. Well, so do we. We want to be accessible. We want to be team-oriented. We want to be highly productive so we can reach a lot of people. We want to be, and be there for the team. We want to be educators for both the patients and the system we're in, and we want it to be routine. We don't want it to be seen as kind of like a specialty service. Well, now that we got that figured out, say you walk in and back to 2014, we didn't have the ratios.
Right.
We didn't have a leadership structure that supported, we didn't even have a department.
We didn't have, PCPs understanding using BHCs for things outside of mental health concerns. Like, there was, this wasn't here.
There was none of that infrastructure, but we still wanted to do it. So where does a person start? Well, you start by being like, okay, I'm going to be able to see all ages, all conditions. Okay, what if you're only one in a clinic? How do you be accessible? Well, maybe that's not possible. So now we have to look further and say, what are some strategies that I could do to be more accessible? Well, maybe I can have 25-ish minute visits versus 50-minute visits.
Can I pause you real quick?
Yeah.
Because there's a couple things that your mind's going to. And I think this is a big thing. And maybe this is even a video for people that, do consulting and different things like that. It goes, again, about reinforcing similar things that we talk to people about when we're doing clinical work, is that applying an indiscriminate behavior in every single situation doesn't usually produce a really functional result. And that's where I love that example that you just gave. It's like, hey, I'm going to value access, but I'm one BHC with 10 PCPs. It's like, what and how we value access is probably going to look different than maybe a system that has 10 PCPs and they have 4 BHCs. Like that, those behaviors might look different. The point though is, as you were saying, access is still the value. So we're shaping our behavior within that value, just germane to the context that we're in. And I think that's a really big thing, because there's so often we do this, and we have done this, where we're like, this is the behavior that you have to do.
You have to scrub and huddle.
Yes, yeah. And I generally agree with that.
You should.
Yeah.
But if you're one BHC and you have 14 medical providers, I would actually argue that scrubbing and huddling could be a negative thing, because you're saying, hey, I can see that person, I can see that person. There's 14 people. You're not going to be able to see them.
Because think about the ripple, and we talk about this regularly, about the ripple that creates, right? So say I'm the BHC, I got 14 medical providers, and I went to a workshop or I saw a video and Dave and Bridge said, I need to go around, scrub the schedules and huddle. One thing that comes up is like, 14 PCPs? Like, how long is it going to take you to get through 14 PCPs in a functional way, right? So that, even from the beginning, becomes a little bit difficult to do. So then you go around and you start scrubbing and huddling, saying you're in an FQHC, and we know there's a high need, just a variety of different things. Basically, every single patient that's on someone's schedule, you can make an argument, could see a BHC. So say those PCPs in a half day are seeing 10 patients. That's 140 patients automatically that are already kind of seeing. Did I say 14 PCPs, or what did I say? Doesn't matter, right? Say there's 10.
We said 14.
We did say 14. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I had the math right.
Yeah,
right?
it's 140 patients.
140 patients. What are we talking about? So now the PCPs are like, say they're game. Say half of them are game. Say half of them are game.
Yeah.
So 70 patients. They're like, I want to get this BHC. It's like, what are you going to do? You're going to see all 70 patients in addition to people now coming back in? So that's where I love how you're saying that, like, understanding being a chef, that's like, this is what I'm looking for. These are the ingredients that I'm really going to do. Now, what is my behavior going to be? Maybe you're intentional with certain PCPs. Maybe you're intentional with certain presenting concerns. I don't know, but you got to be flexible within that approach.
Yeah, and then you can, like you said, you can walk it all the way down. So like the T for being a team player, being team-based. So if you're in a PCBH system where, say there's 3 PCPs and you're the only BHC, well, I mean, those three PCPs you should have this really good relationship with, and you should be talking to them, sitting in the pod with them, writing recommendations into the chart note, all those things. Again, now we're back to the 14. It's you and 14 PCPs. What, you're going to have a close relationship to where you can discuss and case consult with all 14? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that does exist. I'm just finding that hard to keep up with, again, watching all of our videos and going to conferences and seeing the articles and the books, and then you see what we're talking about, and then you want that at your clinic.
And we don't talk about this enough.
Not enough.
Said that we don't talk about that enough. That it's like, what are we talking about? Like, just even breaking that down. That, even a quarter of those, you're talking about 30 to 40 patients that potentially in a half day could use a BHC, and there's one of you. And that doesn't include any patients that you have coming in. So let me ask you this. I'm curious. What would be maybe a starting point that you would suggest? And let's set the context of, we're in primary care. You're in a primary care system. I don't really think it matters necessarily about a FQHC or a non-FQHC. We're just in a primary care system. Regardless, what would be a value or a behavior or something that you would really, really encourage BHCs to do that a high probability it's going to transcend every single context, that no matter what it is, like, you should probably do this? What does your mind say?
It will say, context, I think, matters. That if, okay, so say I feel like we definitely have had a conversation similar to this again. previously from some other videos. So sorry if we're repeating ourselves. But I do think it comes down to what you think, what you want and what you're striving for. So if you're going into a system and you're like, I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to create this program. I am the first one. I'm going to create the program. There'd be a set of actions. Say there was another one where you're like, you know what? I'm going to create the program, and you tried. You tried for 2 or 3 years, and you cannot get, for whatever, I mean, there's myriad reasons, you can't get any traction, and you've decided, you know what? I love this community. I love this organization. We are not in a position right now to kind of get backing or department or funds or any of that stuff. So I'm going to be the lone wolf, but I still want to make a difference. But I'm just probably not going to be at the point where I'm able. So then you have to ask yourself, do I want to stay here knowing that? And if the answer is yes, again, because you love the community, then you're going to have one set of behaviors. If you're like, I'm not okay with that, I really do want to start a program, I would definitely recommend looking elsewhere. So say you're in a situation where, for whatever reason, you love the organization, you're grounded where you are, it doesn't make sense to leave, but the writing is on the wall that organization is not going to be able to move.
This isn't changing anytime.
To primary care, but you still want to make a difference. You still want to be a team player. You still want to think outside the box, but you know that you can't do all the things that we go over. I'd say the number one thing you can do is be very flexible and open-minded about how long your visits are and where you're aiming to have them, and then how often you're having somebody follow up. Because I think if you have the visit takes as long as the visit takes until you have a game plan, and you look at it that most of the visits are going to be about 25, maybe 30-ish minutes, but you now base it upon, from all of our other videos, that the visit is done when you have a good plan. It's plan contingent versus time contingent. And then I think if the second thing you do is you operate on primary care principles with regards to follow-up and challenging yourself and to think outside the box, and maybe listening to some of these videos about having them be flexible, I think that those two things alone, you're probably going to be able to increase the amount of patients you see. I don't know by what fold, but 4 or 5 times amount, you would think?
I think you're 100% spot on with that. My mind goes like this idea of like really taking a single session approach. And honestly, what's interesting is like, and we've talked about this before, even with non-PCBH kind of mental health interventions, I think most should take like a single session approach, just because that would help with access, that would help with people getting in, and I think it's a more humane way of interacting with people too. It's more contextual, it's more compassionate kind of approach. But I love that idea. It's like, hey, what I can do, I'm going to focus in on the visit's going to take as long as the visit takes. As far as kind of like, hey, 10 minutes might produce a moment.
We got a plan.
16, we got a plan. Doing the
or
George,
a moment.
We're doing the George Costanza, right? That we're out after that moment kind of occurs, and just being intentional with follow-ups. That will ripple out. That alone will ripple out pretty profoundly.
And I have one other one.
Please.
Because I want, tangible things for our audience. See the patient and do the visit when they're there.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah.
And I understand. Based on the context, there could be insurance difficulties, there could be a whole slew of things, but I would still say try to work on the front end that if a patient has agreed to see you, to do the visit now instead of going in, introducing yourself, and then having them come back. So and that goes back to being flexible with time. So say you think you only have like 15-ish minutes, 10, 15-ish minutes, still see the patient.
So the two more transcending things that would be, and the first one has kind of 2 components. So one is like, the visit takes as long as the visit takes, and then follow up, what that looks like. But labeling that more as a one way of like managing it. And the second part being like, do the visit now. Like see them now. Like see as many patients as you can, like in the moment that's being requested. Like if they're here, see them. Yeah, I think that's really great, because a couple things that I wrote down, I think it's also kind of like asking yourself, and this is where you need to talk with the organization, are they wanting to do integrated care as a mental health intervention, or are they wanting to do integrated care as a healthcare intervention? And if it's a mental health intervention, that might start to focus this in more on like, hey, we really do want to try to see things like, my mind goes to like depression or anxiety. Like we're going to be really, really focused with that. Even if that is still the goal, I would still say, make sure, as you said, make sure that you're approaching each visit as like a moment. I'm going to try to have a moment. I'm going to be intentional with follow-ups. Does this person need to follow up? And if the person's here, I'm going to try to ask them. So even if that is the thing. And then also, if it's a healthcare intervention, which we're really kind of expanding, I would still say what you said. I thought those were two brilliant things. I think that's a really good way of doing it. So telling BHCs that, like, hey, if it's not Instagram, it's reality. Still taking this on that it's like, I'm going to approach visits in a certain way, and I'm going to try to get patients in now and see them now. I would also say, I think, probably regardless of what type of system, and if it's Instagram, if it's reality, trying to sit with the medical team. If there's shared space, try to sit with them as much as possible. I would also still say probably trying to see patients in exam rooms or rooms that look like that. I think that could be a relative transcendent thing. Now, if there's not enough space and stuff, you're going to do what you can.
Right.
But my mind says that could be also something that's included.
And using the same check-in,
Nice.
reception, the same scheduling.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like with the HRSA levels of integration, that one where like systemically things are all integrated into the same system, sharing the same EHR, having some type of informed consent process that lets patients know that,
that's brilliant.
Hey, there's, a BHC and they're part of the medical team. But yeah, you're not going to, I don't think you're going to be able to do, and maybe I'm wrong, I think it's just like an unfair setup to expect, because, we get all the questions on emails, which totally makes sense of like, it's me and there's 14 folks. Let's just, that's kind of a big
that's
number.
an egregious
let's
number.
Let's just say 10, because that's a little bit more common. There's one of you and there's 10, and it's like, I went in integrated care because I was so excited to work in a medical clinic so I could get diabetes, so I can work with high blood pressure, so I can work with exercise adherence. And I come here and it's only SI, and so then they don't feel valued. And just during this, and I was the same way. We were the same way when we were starting in different conditions. But just remember, like, if there's one of you and there's 10 patients, that's 100 patients a morning, that's 200 patients in the day. Is your PCP going to use your visits for somebody with pre-diabetes?
Correct.
Or are they going to use the visit with you for somebody who's suicidal? So remember, now most of your visits are going to be pretty intense mental health-wise, just by probabilities, just by the way things shake out.
Just by the need and what PCPs are gonna like when you think about this, and we've seen this regularly. It's like PCPs, I think for the most part, understand the value, especially after you talk to them about it. It's like, oh yeah, behavioral health providers would be great to help with things like diabetes and stuff. The difficulty is like when you line up like the priority list of what they need help with, the things that stack the top of these like mental health things that really are difficult to.
They're like, yeah, pre-diabetes, it would be nice to have a BHC, but like this person's acutely suicidal.
And maybe that's the point, is like that BHC that's in that system of having that awareness, even those real conversations with the PCPs, like, listen, we want to get to this point. Like, we want to get to this. Like, this is where we're heading and stuff. Right now, though, with just what we're doing, we want to make sure this is a functional thing, not only for the BHC, but for the PCP to have expectations about what they can expect. That's another thing that I don't think we talk about a lot. One of the reasons why I think PCBH has uptaken as much as it has here, one of the variance points is that PCPs have an expectation of the product that they're getting. They know every single day when they come into our clinics, this is what I can expect. I can expect this many BHCs, I can expect this much access, and then that ripples out to reinforce behavior and shape behavior in future ones. If PCPs can't come up with like, what am I expecting? Like sometimes the BHC is available, sometimes they're not. It then starts to really stunt their behavior. So I think also having that recognition of those conversations, like we're trying to get to this point, this is where we're at right now, let's come up with some functional way to get some expectation that's coming down the line.
I absolutely love what you're saying, because I think that when BHCs watch our videos and we're talking about diabetes, XY, headaches and stuff, it's like, well, then I must be doing something wrong, and I'm not getting any visits for it. And then it's like, oh, it's just human nature, right? Well, the PCPs, they're not giving me any referrals for headaches and diabetes. So now they feel like they're doing something wrong. They feel like their PCPs are maybe doing something wrong, when really no one's doing something wrong. So if you did want to get pre-diabetes visits, then you would have to maybe think of some type of like pathway of, if it was like an A1C of maybe 12. Something that is manageable, because if you make it 9,
there's no way.
You're going to be so inundated by it that you're not going to be able to do anything else. So then it's like, and that's why I think a lot of folks decide to do collaborative care model, COCM model. It's because you're picking a specific condition.
You're focusing on
and then you're following that condition out. Whereas we know in PCBH, we're kind of like, we want to see everyone and everything, But you can't see everyone and everything statistically if there's only the one of you.
I'm having this moment right now, even having like an emotional reaction to it. And I feel for people in a lot of ways because I think, or my mind predicts, again, going to these workshops, reading the books, talking with people, seeing our videos, I think it just makes people set up to feel bad about the work that they're doing, you know. And we were culprits of this too. When we go into systems, like you got to do this, like this is what PCBH is, and the truth.
Not even asking if they're like even ready for again myriad reasons.
Exactly, and I think that's the thing, like almost like having grace and compassion for yourself as a BHC, and then also the system as well. It's like, it might not be that, but we can still, and it's not a but, and we can still do some things. We can still move towards this as long as we know what this value is. And again, I loved what you said about the kind of tangible things, about how to manage visits, follow-ups, you know, maybe where to sit, where to see patients, check-in processes. Those things, like, we can do those things. Let's do those as we build this up. The other thing that my mind ends on is, and this might be speaking out of two sides of our mouth here.
Well, we do that a lot, so.
I would also caution people that it's just not like, well, since I can't do that, I'm just going to do whatever I want. Mm-hmm. Because what most likely my mind predicts is going to happen is that you're going to go back to comfort. And comfort is probably not going to be a great thing with trying to build up a PCBH program, and definitely not a PCBH program that doesn't have the context to really
I think I know what you're saying. Walk me through that just a sec.
Yeah, so say we're back with that situation where you got 10 PCPs, one BHC. Comfort might be like, hey, I can't do any of this. It's not realistic, so I'm just going to go back to what feels right, which means 45-minute visits, means not being interrupted, mean being off by yourself, not really collaborating and different things. So I think that's the thing that sometimes we need to rumble about with. It's like, it's not to say that, hey, there isn't a context that's shaping behavior, because there is. And there's also some intentionality that needs to happen. Like, what if we shape our context a little bit more? What if we shape some of the behaviors intentionally to produce that?
And that's what we were saying is, like, literally, if you know your system is primary care, and you know that for yourself, you want to do primary care behavioral health because you have a value of population-based health. So that's your starting point. Yeah, you might not be able to do all the huddling and the scrubbing and seeing 140 patients or whatever in a morning and all that. But you can advocate, if it's possible, to do the same reception, to do the same check-in, check-out process, to do the same EHR, to maybe send the PCPs the notes back of the patients that you saw. Or if there is something that's going on like right away, maybe you don't even have that many handoff slots because you can't even promise to do handoffs with that many. Maybe you have a little bit more of a scheduled, like you have maybe like 12 patients scheduled. So now you're still seeing 12 at like an abbreviated time. Maybe you're really being flexible with when you have them follow up. And then every single time you see one of the patients, you're sending a message back. And then in between, you're sitting in the pods. And if somebody cancels or some, you come across something and you say yes to that visit, it's not going to look like how our videos look.
Yeah.
With all the stuff, 27 handoffs in a day and stuff that we're talking about. But you're sure impacting the population.
You're still impacting the population and still striving towards that value, and applying behavior discriminately based on what is needed and so forth. So I don't know. I really do appreciate this conversation because it's a tough one to have. I think it's a tough one to have because we do want to have standards, wouldn't be the right word. We do want to have kind of like, as we always said, like fidelity to PCBH, what this is supposed to look like, all these different things. And that's good. And I think we need to talk about that. And we also have to have these real conversations. Like sometimes the context is really difficult.
In the context, I know that we're trying to end, but I'm going to probably open up a huge can of worms, which we don't have to talk about at this PCBH Corner, is I could actually argue that just indiscriminately applying the behaviors that we might talk about or an article might talk about, I think could actually be harmful.
I think across the board harmful. To
the system. Yeah, they're like, you all promised this, this, and this, and now you're not able to deliver. And so it's like, well, I don't really even want to do integrated care.
My mind was thinking about this as we're, so one of the things that we manage is, we have close to 20 BHCs throughout our 5 clinics, and we're very intentional on ensuring coverage at each one of the clinic, right? So one of the things that we have to do is that we have to make sure, like when people are taking PTO, we have this whole like algorithm of schedules and stuff. The reason why we do that is because we know if there is like these wanes of coverage and stuff, what that does to the behavior. And I agree, if you're a PCP and like some days you have BHCs, some days you don't, or some days you have a lot of BHCs and some days you don't, and there's nothing done about that, I don't know. Like, I think that's probably still better behavior for the PCP. I would be super frustrated if I was that PCP though. Like, it's like some days I have BHC and I love it and it's great, but other days I don't. It's like, well, this is annoying.
Yeah,
like,
so some days you incorporate it into your like approach to care, and then some days you don't have it, so then you have to adjust out of it. And some of this is real. Again, nobody panic.
Yeah.
This is the reality. And in our system, we don't even have coverage all the time at some of the clinics. So we are putting our PCPs through that.
I know.
But the point is that we're on it. We're trying to like address it, but it takes time because we're a new field. And so anyway, I just think that we wanted to have this PCBH corner to say, if you're out there and you're working hard, excuse me, if you're out there and you're working hard, there are some things that you can do. And start by finding the mission, find out what aligns with your values, and then almost kind of engineer and work backwards to see what strategies are even feasible at this moment. And then start there. And
always be iterating. Always be iterating when you can, you know, and that's the thing about iterating. But I really, really loved, and I loved what you also said about some of the transcendent things. Visit structure, when people follow up, seeing them now, and then sitting with the team and the check-in process.
And I cannot believe we made a whole PCBH corner without talking about the contextual interview. That's another thing. So check out our other videos on the contextual interview. That's another way of taking that approach, that you can engineer things to be a little bit more flexible with having a moment, making a plan, and follow-up is when you're taking a functional approach to it and a contextual
it makes
approach.
Sense to do it.
It makes more sense to do it. So check out our other videos on that, and definitely let us know what you thought.
Be kind to yourself too. I think that's, yeah, let us know feedback, thoughts, and be kind throughout this process. We're still trying to figure this thing. I actually wrote down one of these things is that it's like we're not even sure what this is supposed to be yet, you know, in a lot of different ways. So be kind to yourself, and thank you for always the work that you're doing.
See you guys.